I'm assuming we'll start with Sixers Knicks.
Yes, that is correct. We are live right now, though, so
I know, but
okay.
as we let it populate, we can chit chat. Maybe people will like that.
Why would anybody want to hear chit chat? That's one of my favorite Seinfeld lines. Is why would anybody want
Did you finish Curb?
No, for some reason I just never watched it as religiously. Every time I watch it, I love it, but I just
I just finished. Well, so I caught up right before the last season. I was a few seasons behind. Maggie refuses to watch Curb because she Larry David pisses her off so much.
So this will amuse you and everybody watching. I had an ex-girlfriend once who refused to watch the show with me. This is an indication of how long the show has been on. It's been on for like 15 years, and maybe more than that. Probably more than that. But I had an ex-girlfriend who refused to watch it with me because I reminded her too much of Larry David. So she would watch the show and find herself becoming less attracted to me as a result. It's like he's just like you. I'm like, well, I did watch Seinfeld growing up as one of the more formative TV shows for me. All right, you ready to get rocking here?
Anytime.
All right. All right, welcome on to Dunked On Prime, Dunked On YouTube. We have much to discuss here, and of course, that should begin with maybe the first legendary playoff game of Joel Embiid's career, Danny.
It really was. And not only was it the first 40-point individual scoring performance of this year's playoffs, it was the first 50-point scoring performance of these playoffs. And Joel Embiid really had the jumper working. That is a big part of the story here. 13 to 19 from the field, 5 of 7 from 3, and then, a light 19 of 21 from the free throw line. We will discuss the foul proclivities of this game at a later point, not at the start, because the start is Joel Embiid.
Yeah, it was, and he did it really from the outside. That was the crazy part of it, that it really, I think during the portion of the game before it devolved into fouling late, I think you noted this stat during our broadcast that he had only taken 6 shots in the paint, and he was just making everything from the outside. And we've noted this in previous discussions of games in this series, but in some ways I've actually kind of liked what this injury has forced Joel Embiid to do, that he's just had to be decisive. Like, he's a really good shooter, and because he likes to just kind of play with the ball, and he's always been able to just do whatever he wanted to, and he could always get something better or draw a bullshit foul and get to the foul line. He wouldn't be that decisive. And so now when he gets the ball and he's open from 3-point range, he's been shooting it immediately all series. After game 1, he's been taking the mid-rangers. Oh, he's 7 to 10 from mid-range in game 2. And what were his shooting splits in this one?
Embiid was 2 of 3 in the restricted area, 1 of 3 in the upper paint, then 5 of 6 on long twos or mid-rangers, and then 5 of 7 on all above the break threes. He doesn't take quarter threes.
Yeah, and particularly those 5 threes. He missed his first 2 and then went 5 for 5 during about 13, 14 minutes of his own playing time. And the last 2 were ridiculous shots. One of them he got kind of a bullshit 4-point play on, but it was still fantastic. And like, he's a great shooter. He's a great shooter from the foul line. So it was really impressive. Also, we found out Brian Sutter, I'll give him credit for noticing this a few days ago after game 2, that he seemed to be suffering from a case of Bell's palsy, which is this is supposed to be a mild case in his situation, but where part of the face, one side of the face gets paralyzed due to a some issue with the facial nerve. Usually it happens on that side. Now, maybe that could have had something to do with the fact that he was struggling to just like grab rebounds that were right in his hand in game 2. I haven't read anything about that being the case. Maybe he just like wasn't seeing as well out of that eye or couldn't focus that eye as well. But so basically, he wasn't able to blink and like can't really make an expression. And then he didn't feel comfortable talking to the media, obviously, too, is like covering his face there. So it doesn't appear like guys have had this and played with it before. The one issue is if you're not going to wear goggles, it's just you can't really close your eye if like something's about to hit you in the eye, which is a little bit of a problem. So it's obviously uncomfortable. It doesn't seem to have affected him that much or present like a huge risk going forward, but it is something that having to deal with the treatment of that as well, and obviously kind of a scary situation to be dealing with. So for him to fight through that, I thought was really impressive. uh so that's it's great to see. Like, to me, the biggest question, even more than how he was feeling physically and all that, was his jump shot actually going to go in these playoffs? That's the biggest thing that's been a difference, and since game 1 it has for him.
I want to talk about his offense more, but another way that Embiid impacted this game beyond getting both when they were both available, Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson in foul trouble during the first half, was he still had to turn around the basket. And the proportion of shots that an opponent takes in the restricted area versus in the upper paint, that varies on a lot of factors, including transition and everything else. But as a point of comparison, it was 23-10 for the Sixers, and then it was 23-26 for the New York Knicks. And so that gives you an idea that that is a lot more shots in the paint. The Sixers were drilling their threes and getting to the line. But even when Joel Embiid is somewhat limited, he is still a gigantic human being. And even though the Sixers changed their pick and roll coverage, his presence changes the shots that the Knicks get and the Knicks take.
Yeah, it was really important, even in a game where the Knicks were awesome on offense as well. I mean, during what I consider the competitive portion of the game, the Sixers had offensive rating well over 140, and the Knicks are, 127, and they're losing by like 12, 13 points. The other thing that they did, it's actually something I was calling for after game 1, was just more post ups for Joel Embiid as well. They actually did post ups on the first 3 possessions of the game for Embiid, and that's part of how he was able to get Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson in foul trouble. He was able to have a couple of those face-up decisive drives to his left as well to draw fouls, and it just seemed like in previous series the post-ups have kind of been de-emphasized. Remember last year it was more working at the nail and James Harden on the short roll finding him. And then, that was kind of taken away by some of the strategies that were used against him last year. And then this year it was, all right, we're going to use him way more in the handoff game with Maxey. And then going back to those post-ups, because Tom Thibodeau's defense is not quite as creative or as versatile maybe as some of the other teams like a Miami that they've gone against in past years, or a Boston. Those straight post-ups actually have worked pretty well. And then in the second half, it really was more of just the three-pointer and getting a few BS fouls. I thought most of the fouls, other than that 3-shot foul, were pretty legitimate up until the end, when it was sort of, it became just like a foul fest, and New York was pressing and trying to get back.
Well, unfortunately, there was another important foul element of this game that was earlier on, which was the engagements that Joel Embiid had in the very beginning of the game, and those were with Mitch Robinson and with Isaiah Hartenstein, incidentally in like basically immediate succession, even though they felt like a long time apart because of a replay review. And so the first one of those was Embiid being down on the floor. He's completely out of the play, and Mitchell Robinson grabs the rebound, and Joel Embiid basically grabs his legs as Mitchell Robinson is going into the air. And the officials ruled this a flagrant one. And to me, there was a very easy argument for it to be a flagrant 2. And I'm not saying it was like, oh, it's like egregious by the refs that it had to be a flagrant one, or that was not a flagrant two. However, that is what I would have called it, because the biggest problem with what Embiid did on the Mitchell Robinson play was there was absolutely zero basketball related element. He's on the ground, he's grabbing a guy's legs, a guy who's kind of in the process of going into the air. And even though thankfully there was not any injury on this play, though Mitchell Robinson got hurt in the game, there was a significant chance of it, because you're going into the air and you're grabbing a guy. Like, there are a lot of different things that can go wrong. So I believe, I don't know if we'll even get a pool report kind of on this point, that part of the thought process might be, oh, we're about to, like, the choice here is to knock out a superstar player in the beginning of a game for a call that could be a 1 or a 2. But I think it should have been a flagrant 2.
Yeah, there was a pool report on it. Keith Pompey asked one question, and Zach Zarba gave us basically that all of the officials agreed it should be a flagrant 1. And he basically just quoted the rule. He's like, well, we thought it was this, gives definition of flagrant 1, and we didn't think it was this, gives definition of flagrant 2. Oh, no, it wasn't. I forget exactly what it was. It was unnecessary, it wasn't unnecessary, and excessive, or whatever. Like, those words are completely meaningless, right? I mean, I think that, there are certain precedents. Like, if you hit a guy in the nether regions, or try to, if you only hit his leg, usually it's a flagrant 1, and if you actually connect, it's a flagrant 2, right? They've kind of had these precedents over the years. Obviously, if you throw a punch, that's a little bit different. Embiid's explanation on the play, he said he was trying to make sure Mitchell Robinson doesn't land on me, because obviously we know the history that I have with Kuminga landing on my knee, so I kind of had some flashbacks. When it came down to it, it was unfortunate. I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I just, in those situations, I got to protect myself, because I've been in way too many situations where I'm always the recipient of the bad end of it. Do you find that explanation at all credible?
Credible, yes. Persuasive to change what I would rule on the call? No. Because you do it on the action that occurs. And even if I am sympathetic that Embiid has been at the brunt of some injuries, including some bizarre ones, that, I mean, he grabbed a player's legs who is about to go into the air, where he has zero chance of getting the ball or doing anything else. Like, the league at times makes player safety a bigger thing, but for me, it's the complete lack of a basketball, like a credible basketball play, that makes it something that you just don't need that shit in the game. Like, that is the way that it can go. And it would have been, I mean, in that moment, it would have felt really bizarre to eject Joel Embiid because of the consequences in the series. When it turns into being his greatest playoff game of his career so far, that changes things too, in terms of like what we would have lost out on as basketball fans in that circumstance. But I also don't think those things should matter at all.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't. I think part of why I think he committed that foul is just because it is Mitchell Robinson, and they just wanted to foul him to put him in line. And in fact, he missed both free throws. And he just kind of knew it. Seemed like the smart play at the time. I'm sure there was a quick discussion before the series, like, all right, if Mitchell Robinson gets the ball down there, he's about to go up for a dunk, like, make sure you grab him. That was obviously a dangerous way for him to do it. I mean, if it's not just like so unbelievably obvious, I think you don't kick someone out of that game. And yes, particularly when they're down 0-2, and this could end the series, and it's one of the star players. Like, this is an entertainment product. I am glad personally that he did not get kicked out. It does really surprise me how often neutral fans are like, really want guys kicked out of the game.
Oh yeah, I'm not one of those, to be abundantly clear. I just think that the conduct was deserving.
Yeah, no, I got you. I mean that's, and it was certainly a dangerous play. I would have to go back and look at the precedent on plays like that. I don't know that they're like grabbing a guy like that necessarily is, something that has generally been punished with a flagrant 2. In any event,
and then
and he's not a player who has like any kind of a history either, though. That's not supposed to apply in game. It is potentially supposed to apply to.
I mean, he has a history of things like not like this. Like I'm not encyclopedic on this. Like I was thinking of the like Rondo Wade thing or something like that. But he has like there are dirty play has elements of Joel Embiid's history, if I'm remembering correctly. But they're not like this necessarily. And then immediately after this, there was the play where Embiid gets a technical for hitting Isaiah Hartenstein with his leg. And I'm very familiar with this because of all the Draymond Green stuff over the years, a flagrant and a technical does not equal an ejection. And so he stays in the game. And then remarkably, Embiid, another part of his story in this contest is that he picks up his third foul, I believe was shortly after the Hartenstein issue. Might have actually been in the second quarter. And we're discussing, we're doing the live show at that point because the Cavs Magic game was such a blowout. And we're discussing whether to like take him out or how to navigate this. And Joel Embiid does not commit a single foul the rest of the game. And so that's part of how he was able to play enough to get 50 minutes of action or to get 50 points in 41 minutes of action.
Yeah, and credit Nurse for leaving him out there as well, particularly when he's going to be involved in nearly every pick and roll. Let's get to that now. The Knicks offense, Jalen Brunson had really been held down. And Nick Nurse noted that they changed their coverage in the second half of game 2 after Josh Hart had hit 8 of 9 3-pointers in a row. And Hart did miss one late in game 2, but he'd had a great stretch in the second half of game 1 and the first half of game 2. And so they kind of stopped doing the Kyle Lowry is going to hang out in the paint thing. And that was one of the biggest things that flummoxed Brunson. And the other one was kind of this playing behind him. And that, of course, those two things go together with one another, working pretty well. The Knicks, I thought they also really did a great job of setting screens higher on the floor to get Brunson going downhill. There was fewer stuff on the side. If they did do stuff on the side, they tried to go to more ISO as well. But what setting screens for him higher up on the floor did was it enabled him to accelerate. And that was useful in two ways. One, it kind of forced Embiid to get out a little bit higher. And then there's the threat of Brunson potentially accelerating, getting past Embiid, and then Embiid would go backwards and Brunson could get to his pull-up, which is what he wants to get to anyway. And then the second point is that it enabled him to get more separation going downhill fast from that guy doing the rear view contest. And now that he's flying downhill, the guy trying to do the rear view contest, he has to start running faster. So he can't stay in control, right? The way you're doing it before is you're still on his back the whole time. He feels you. You're not ever trying to get back in front. And then if he is just standing there right in front of you, goes up for the jumper and you can block it or bother it from behind, or at least body him a little bit so it's off balance and he can never get comfortable. This way, though, once there's a lot of separation, he's going fast, that guy has to run really fast. And then he can't get that rear view contest because he's worried he's going to just slam into the back of Jalen Brunson. And so that enabled Brunson to get going a lot more. In the end, Brunson, 45 minutes in the game, played the entire second half, and he went 13 of 27 for the field, 10 of 12 from the foul line. Most of those came in the fourth quarter. Most of those were rather questionable calls, basically through 2.5 quarters of this game. I loved the way it was being refereed, and then all of a sudden it turned into like a mid-season game where these guys were getting all the bullshit calls, and maybe the referees knew that Philly had a big lead and they didn't want the final tally of free throws to be quite so inconsistent. I don't know about that, but there's
the fourth quarter, I think it actually wasn't that disparate. Yeah, so Philly, as things turned out, Philly took 19 and the Knicks took 9 in that fourth quarter. It's just that all the Brunson ones felt really frustrating. And I mean, there were plenty of Sixers ones that were as well. So there are a couple different factors. And I think that the pick and roll coverage becomes a notable battleground for game 4 in this series because you have the combination of Philadelphia winning the game, but also I think that the coverage was in no real part the reason why it happened. And so Nick Nurse, I would trust him more to deviate from a path that was a part of a win, even if it wasn't successful, but it is going to pose some questions. And Josh Hart was 4 for 8 from 3 in this one. So it's not like he was, that they're going to see like, oh, he went back, reverted to terrible shooter again. You're going to go and that sort of a direction. So that's something to keep an eye on. And the Sixers, they got some rest. They will get even more rest because game 4 of this series isn't till Sunday. It's they have an extra. It'll be the early game on Sunday, but it's presumably, but it is on Sunday, and so whether Nurse, whether Thibodeau, the adjustments that they make based on game 3 will be fascinating because of how anomalous it was or how different it was than the first two.
The Sixers did do a lot of changing up. They even had a couple of times where they had Joel out on the floor. Those got cooked pretty badly. The whole, like, they haven't really gone to, like, truly trying to get the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands. They also are still basically going to switch anything 1 through 4 involving him. And he was able to have some more success against Maxey in particular. And then, they did still do a couple plays where they went back to the old Lowry hang out in the middle of the paint. And if you don't do that every time, it does become more effective when you do try it and they have to react to it, as opposed to just doing the same thing every time. We haven't seen the box and one really at all since game 1. That's something maybe they could try to get back to as well. But I mean, the Knicks, this is probably still the case. Maybe it's the Sixers now, but KP noted that they actually had the highest offensive rating in the playoffs through 2 games, even though they had shot poorly and Brunson had shot poorly because of all the offensive rebounds. Also, nobody is forcing any turnovers in these games at all. Part of that is everyone's playing a billion minutes and just don't kind of have the energy for that low. These are both teams that are playing largely in a drop as well. Brunson is a really low turnover guy. So is Maxey, the 2-point guard. So there just aren't going to be that many turnovers in this series. And Philly actually controlled the possession game a little bit more. The Knicks were good on the offensive glass early, and then Philly was able to get more of those late as well, which was a big factor in their winning. What else stuck out to you from this one? Anything new? Any player usage stuff that was interesting? I mean,
Yes.
they're basically just yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Precious Achiuwa. So Achiuwa came in because of the combination of foul trouble, but then unfortunately Mitchell Robinson, another ankle injury. We don't know his availability moving forward in the series, but he did not play in the rest of this contest.
He left in a walking boot, and there's been some ominous reporting, shall we say, about his availability for game 4, and I would even guess potentially beyond that.
And what I really loved about Precious Achiuwa, and this lines up with the last few years of his career, is how well he defended Tyrese Maxey, how well he moved his feet. Achiuwa he's a hybrid big in many ways. Like in some ways, sort of like former teammate Bam Adebayo. You can make an argument that Achiuwa is actually better as a switch big than as a traditional big. And there were plays where Maxey's trying to come downhill a million miles. He moves like 3 steps to the side, stays with him, and contests the shot. And so one way that I think Tom Thibodeau should use Precious Achiuwa for the remainder of the series, and I would argue, even if Mitchell Robinson is able to return, is in the minutes, making sure that he is the sole big in the minutes where Tyrese Maxey is on the floor and Joel Embiid is not. Because in those minutes, those in the regular season, those were really good, but the sample and everything else. But what you can do if you want to switch actions involving Maxey, you can do that. But it reduces some of your downside risk, and and I think that there's plenty of reason to believe that Achiuwa can continue to do that. Now, how much you want to use him in the Embiid minutes, he did a reasonably good job. And according to those who have a stronger memory on these things than I do, he defended him pretty well in previous, when Achiuwa was on the Raptors. And so you can go to it at that point. And Achiuwa has some limitations, but I thought he played well.
Yeah, he's the matchup between he and Maxey was interesting. I think it was kind of like 2 for 4. Maxey was trying to go right at him. And yeah, you could also go for, which they did a couple of times, putting Anunoby on Maxey and then switching Anunoby onto Embiid and Achiuwa onto Maxey. That's certainly something that they could think about a little bit. Certainly my thought in terms of adjustments is like you got to make Joel put the ball on the floor from the outside,
Yes.
it seems like, at this point. And, that's tough. Like Tyrese Maxey is really quick. It's very hard. And particularly when Joel is just shooting it the moment it touches his hands. Like there are times when either they would try to late switch back to him at a pick and pop, or they would try to bring a third guy over from the weak side wing on the pick and pop. And Joe, those last 2 3 pointers, he just shot right over that guy, even though the guy was basically like right in his chest. It was a very difficult shot, but he drained that. And I don't think you want to overreact to Joel's 3 point shooting like too much. I think they also need to front him in the post. Like they're running a few cross screens, but Joel is not going to move really hard. I think you front, you bring some backside help. Like the Sixers aren't some like great cutting team off the ball that's going to like beat you if you've got a little backside help there for the lob. Like make Embiid work for those catches a lot. Or I think that's actually, particularly when they go with the Achiuwa, I think that's something that he can use his quickness to try to stay in front of Embiid. I don't know that Embiid is like a dominating offensive rebounder at this point. And then if he does try to hit the offensive glass, you might be able to run as well. So that's I think that you can't be letting him get these post-ups because he's proven that he can score against their centers, get them in foul trouble on those plays.
I've brought this up during the playoffs previously, but I also think that trying to bring help that doesn't open up a pass right in Joel Embiid's line of sight, like memorable because he came from the backside or anything like that. Can't do that every single time, but you can bring in something else like that.
Yeah. And they were bringing help towards the end, right? Like it was more
Yes.
single coverage early on, and then they started bringing over whoever the low man was along the baseline over to the strong side. They even brought another guy. There was one play where Oubre actually got a cut into the lane, and Joel missed him when they brought two guys over to the strong side. But I think it's more about making him work, not letting him catch the ball there.
Agreed.
Would be my biggest thing to focus on.
We also saw some more of Hartenstein at the dotted line, which was a tactical wrinkle in the second half of game 2, where Jalen Brunson would usually national on the baseline, find Hartenstein. Hartenstein took more attempts in the floater range than he did in restricted area. It was 4 of 6 versus 2 of 3. I think they can go to that more, though Philly changing their pick and roll coverage at times. It's just the locations on the floor can be a little bit different there. I think it is a shot that Hartenstein can make. It is a shot that Joel Embiid will concede, and it's a weird spot to bring help, particularly against a player who is a willing, adept passer. So you can't build your offense on it, but it is an opportunistic thing. And I mean, Hartenstein, 14 points in 26 minutes for a guy who isn't, no Thibodeau big is ever a high usage big, but particularly for Hartenstein, I think you could do that. He had a couple nice passes, only credited with 1 assist.
And that Philly barrage in the third quarter, we got to talk about that, right? It was just, they hit 9 of 11 threes in the period. Maxey was going crazy. Campaign came in and gave him a nice boost, actually, in both halves. He got a little thirsty as he started to heat up some, but he got the minutes instead of Buddy and actually, gave them just something reliable as essentially a third creator, which they have lacked with the demise of Tobias Harris, who they tried to get going early on, but he faded as he always seems to, although he gave his usual effort defensively.
Nate, I don't know if you looked it up. Do you know Philly's offensive rating in the third?
No, I mean, they had 43 points, though, and this was an extremely low possession game, so I'm guessing it was, like, close to a 200.
It was over 200, 204.8.
Fuck. Yeah, and they didn't have any turnovers either. I mean,
No.
yeah. I mean, if you hit 9 3-pointers and you've got, like, 22 possessions, it's a pretty good start towards having like a.
And they also had 2 offense. So they had 1 turnover and 2 offensive rebounds. So they got more of their own misses than New York kind of ended possessions in that fashion. And so that's pretty ridiculous. They were 17 of 22 from the field, 9 of 12 from 3. No free throws, but who the hell cares? You got a 200.
I mean, the Knicks were like, it seemed like the Knicks were scoring on every possession and like continuing to fall behind. It was unbelievable.
And just hemorrhaging points. It was ridiculous. And like, well, one other part of that was that Tyrese Maxey was super hot in the beginning. He had 10 points in like the first 5 minutes of the quarter, and then didn't score in the entire rest of the quarter because that's when Embiid got hot. He had 18 just in the third.
Yeah, and that said, even though these were like unbelievable offensive games, it's like, and Philly was like hitting a bunch of shots, and most of them were open. They hit a couple of crazy contested ones. But I guess I wasn't like that convinced by either team's offensive performance in this game somehow.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, and I mean, it's colored a little bit by how gross the ending was, but I mean, we've also kind of you could see these teams get cold, you could see everything go else. Yeah, I don't think this is going to necessarily be like an offensive series every beat moving forward. They can have these hot moments, and it has been fun that they've generally ebbed and flowed together, unlike some other series. So we got interesting games in all three so far. But yeah, that's something to watch. And kind of along that line, you mentioned the troubles for Tobias Harris. Yes, Philly won this game, and you very rarely make adjustments after a game that you won. I think it's time to give up the ghost, and even if Nicola Batum is not playing too many more minutes as a starter, to have him start and play Tobias Harris less, because he not only is it that Tobias Harris, like, he isn't really an offensive threat. It's that, and this of course came up at the end of game two. It's that he's seems like he's calcified in rebounding actions, sometimes on defense, and it's just I don't understand the point of him playing, not only playing that many minutes, but like it's not like he's making life easier on Joel Embiid. It's not like he's making life easier on the defense. Where okay, you need to play him 20 minutes, you might as well play him 20 with Embiid. He played 33 minutes in this game and did very little positive.
Yeah, got a couple of buckets early, but as we noted, it's just really a struggle for him trying to get off the floor for rebounds or exploding around the basket. And he's in his early 30s. You kind of forget that. He came into the league very, very young. I mean, he's been around for like well over 10 years at this point, and it is the idea of him getting a big free agent contract with like the Pistons or something. It seems unlikely to me, but we'll see who their new president of basketball operations is and how much power that gentleman has. Also want to say Kelly Oubre had a really nice, efficient game, 15 points, had a couple of nice cuts. Embiid was actually able to find him late. The other thing that Philly was doing on basically every possession was starting it out with Maxey running a double pick and roll with the first guy screener being Brunson's man and hoping to get Brunson switch on to Maxey, and then they could run some stuff with Embiid, or potentially just rejecting the screen if they tried to send him away from it, forcing Brunson to switch on that way. That worked a little bit better. I thought keeping them on the side, particularly on the left side of the floor. I think Maxey is nowhere near as good on the left side of the floor as he is on the right side, because he really likes that strong, hard right-handed dribble to the corner of the backboard. It's kind of his primary move, although he certainly can step back to his left and be effective there. I do think keeping him on the sides a little bit better that way, and also can kind of compromise the spacing a little bit. But that's going to be another battleground of what the Knicks want to do against that play to avoid Brunson getting switched out there. I think Brunson wasn't like so terrible in this game defensively, but he had to play 45 minutes and he has to initiate every action for the Knicks. So that's tough. A couple of smaller notes. The Knicks, it seemed like every ATO is for an OG Anunoby action, and then he just never touches the ball at any other time as part of the primary action. It's kind of weird that they always just go to him out of that. The Kings will kind of do that with Harrison Barnes too, but it's just odd where it's like, why are you running an ATO for this guy all the time, but then you just never give him the ball any other time?
It is strange, for sure.
I think that's about all I have here. Yeah, DiVincenzo didn't play as much. Josh Hart, just utterly lazy game, only 43 minutes. Yeah, Boyan came back to earth a little bit. He only played 13. I mean, would you consider? I guess probably not, because he's the backup center. Would you consider any of Achiuwa at the 4?
Consider, yes. Lean heavily on. I mean, Miles McBride only played 22. Miles McBride only played 22 minutes. You'd have to structure the rotation a little differently. Maybe you just kind of have him play 30 and occupy some of those, but that's hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, the idea being you would also then play Anunoby, and I mean, I guess the thing is, like, they love Josh Hart so much, so why, like, they just don't want to play Precious instead of him. But I would kind of think, like, put Precious as the primary guy on Embiid, put Anunoby on Maxey, then you still have the center hanging out more along the baseline. Like they have capable corner 3-point shooters out there. So that is a little bit of a concern. It's not like there's even like an Aaron Gordon type that the guy can hang out on. Although that's Aaron Gordon killed the Lakers today, so I'm sure Philly would love to have Aaron Gordon if they could. But they have a different structure to their offense. Or you could even consider maybe, I guess maybe they feel Hart is too slow to guard Maxey, but maybe they could do Hart on Maxey and go with Anunoby on Embiid and kind of get some of the same effect potentially. But I'm not sure if they want to. You're probably going to end up giving up a fair number of corner threes, but hopefully then once whoever it is gets in the paint, Joel, you can peel switch onto those guys in the corner. Once the center picks them up, helping. Yeah, that
Well,
might be
and
a
also
little too creative for Tom Thibodeau.
I think that it would lead to Embiid trying and sometimes succeeding, doing more work. The idea of he'd have to, when you have a smaller guy on you, are you gonna, get your butt into the paint and do all these other things, or are you going to? Because standing around the arc, you can do it with a smaller player on you, but maybe he'd be tempted to try to be more assertive, and more assertive that makes him work harder, makes him take more energy.
Well, and this was the first game too. I thought that Embiid's exhaustion was not palpable by the end of the game, and perhaps part of that is just being able playing himself into better shape. And maybe the knee is feeling better. Like this is the first game that he didn't really seem to be laboring too much in that respect. He did have one really nice aggressive drive for a foul from the 3-point line going left, where I think he's probably more comfortable going left, pushing off his right leg to go left. Because his right leg is the good leg. Yeah, let's just pray that they referee the next game the way they did the first 2.5 quarters instead of the last 1.5.
Yes.
Should we move on here?
Yes. I have a transition, but I don't think it's to the game we want to talk about next.
No, that's fine. We can do a quick one here.
So the Philadelphia 76ers did not actually have the best second half offensive rating of the games that occurred on Thursday. That honor instead goes to the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic, who have of course struggled, and who, it is important to note, a lot of the second half of that game was garbage time, but it was earned garbage time because the Orlando Magic found their offense and were able to get a surprisingly dominant 121-83 win, which not only pushed the series to 2-1, but also was the largest playoff loss in the history of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, well, those Mike Fratello teams played at probably half the number of possessions per game that we have today. So that maybe that's what caused that. So changes for Jamal Mosley brought Wendell Carter Jr. back into the starting lineup. John and I talked about his decision to start Isaac today. John liked it. I was not a fan of it, but I think it really just disrupted their offensive rhythm. The biggest takeaway that I had in this one, I would say too, I mean, it was just a massive shooting outlier game on both sides, which, even to be fair to the Magic, 8 out of 37 and 9 out of 35 in the first 2 games, even for a shit 3-point shooting team like them, was incredibly bad. And they shot passably. What did they end up from 3? They were
13 to 37.
All right, yeah, so it wasn't anything super crazy in the end, but they were 8 of 20 at one point, and they got that 20-point lead early. So that was certainly enough. To me, though, their 2-point jump shooting and floater shooting was just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, just particularly Paolo was hitting incredible, like, fadeaway jumpers from, to be fair, 13 feet, not 18 feet. But he was like going into guys and, fading away over Mobley, and just like Paulo Banchero is, I think he shoots something like, 38% on mid-range jumpers this year, if memory serves. Like, he's definitely below 40%. So he's not just some mid-range maven. Maybe there'll be a time where he gets there in his career, but he was that in this one. What were the final stats for them in terms of their shooting from both upper paint and mid-range? Because I remember it was ridiculous when I stopped looking at it.
It continued to be ridiculous. 9 of 14 upper paint, 10 of 14 from mid-range. So that is a combined 19 of 28 on 2-pointers away from the basket, significantly better than the 15 of 27 that they shot around the basket.
Yeah, absolutely. And for his part, Banchero, 5 of 5 from mid-range. 4, wow, actually got up 9 above the break 3-pointers, but he made 4 of those. He was very confident shooting those early. This is amazing. Yeah, he was 3 of 6 upper paint and 1 of 6 at the rim, although he did have a few tip backs. And he came out and tried to set a tone physically as well. He had, I think, 6 offensive rebounds just in the first half alone.
He did.
And
No, he had 6 in the first quarter. He had
excuse me.
6 he had
Yeah.
6 in the first quarter. The Magic had 9 offensive rebounds and the Cavs had 10 defensive rebounds. Keep in mind this is a quarter when Orlando scored 31 points. So like they were scoring or getting their own misses on basically every possession.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. So so that was a big part of it. And then Cleveland couldn't hit a 3. They were 1 of 12 just in the first quarter, and then things didn't get much better from there.
Well, actually, on that front, while we're talking about their shooting, sorry, one interrupted, but
oh yeah,
Cleveland's starting fives 3-point shooting in this game. It's pretty incredible. So Mitchell, Garland are the headliners. They were a combined 2 for 10. Well, unfortunately, the rest of the starting lineup was a combined 0 for 7. So that is 2 for 17 overall for the Cavs starting 5. They did have some bench players who hit one, including Sam Merrill, but it's hard for almost any team to overcome that. And the Magic,
and Merrill was all in garbage time too.
Yes,
I don't think
I believe it was
any in the first half.
Yeah, and so if your starting 5 shoots 2 for 17 on threes, and you give up a 134 offensive rating, pretty hard to win the game. And so the question is going to be, I believe that was yesterday's show. I brought up the concept of equilibrium. And the idea of, you have these games in the series, they're often, because we're dealing with small samples, they're outliers, often in the positive and negative directions for each of the teams in play. And we now have 3 really extreme results in this series. And I think that the true talent level is still, I think the Cavs are the better team. And I think that their lineups make more sense, though Carter, in some ways, it's even some of the like in between stuff that he does better than what Jonathan Isaac, who I love. Like Carter Jr., if he gets the ball like with a slight advantage, getting downhill, he's not just going to like do something terrible with, like, he might get fouled, he might get a layup or make a decent pass. Isaac just can't do that kind of stuff. So he helps the connective tissue of their offense, despite not being a superlative offensive player himself.
Yeah. So, what's your feeling on the change? Well, I guess fewer notes we can talk to it, and then we can think about whether the series has changed some or not. The Magic had this 13-0 run to end the first. Like, that was huge. They're getting a ton of misses, transition, and I thought they also, not only did they continue to come out aggressively in terms of shooting the 3-pointer when they were open, no matter who it was. They got the Isaac Wagner group back together.
Yes.
That was outstanding. Once more, that was good to see. Wagner was plus 21, Isaac plus 17. Basically, everyone who played was plus double digits. And then they also, it seemed like, were very cognizant of trying to just be even more aggressive going to the rim and going through the chest specifically of Allen and Mobley with guys who are a little bit stronger, trying to just knock them backwards for the finishes. And Franz tried to just absolutely end Jared Allen, and Jared Allen ended him early in the first with a ridiculous shot block Alonzo Mourning style, where he just had the hand up there right in front of the rim and just waited for him to bring it to him. However, the Magic were much better at getting to the foul line, at least during the competitive portion, and they just never gave up. And then they really punished them on the offensive glass as well, like we talked about with Paolo, had 7 of their 14 offensive rebounds. But this was the first time that the Magic, who do have the physicality and athleticism advantage in the series, even if it's not quite as much as I think people thought at the beginning of the series, were able to impose that. Donovan Mitchell now, couple of ugly games in a row, only played 27 minutes, 6 of 16, 13 points, 1 free throw attempt, which he missed. Cleveland just didn't get to the foul line at all. I would be trying to go after Paolo Banchero more. I thought they had reasonable success there, particularly when Paolo was getting in foul trouble in the first. Like Karis LeVert crooked him a couple of times for big dunks, getting to the basket. So I do think trying to get Mitchell matched up with Banchero is something that could also tire Paolo out as well. Paolo was great overall with 31 points in 29 minutes, got up 26 shots in those 29 minutes and had 14 rebounds, 5 assists. Jalen Suggs looked amazing. He had 24 points and he was excellent as a cutter. Also as a driver, he was another just really aggressive Magic player. He had a huge dunk coming down the lane off of a cut where Mitchell just lost him. So he looked totally fine after that hyperextension knee scare in game 2. And Marco Fultz actually had a bounce back. I still think he's been struggling defensively to stay in front of guys the way I would have liked, but they gave him the ball more, let him run some pick and roll, get in the lane, try to spray out to shooters a little bit instead of just parking him in the dunker spot all night.
Something else to continue to monitor in this series, Cleveland has a very good defense, and they in the regular season they were able to force turnovers. I think they forced turnovers at a reasonable rate. I'm not. I think they were like top half, but not like top 5, as I recall it. And they were not forcing turnovers really at all in this game. So they were 10th in the regular season. So that was relatively right. Eight turnovers for the Magic in the entire contest. Only 2 of those were steals, and so that is concerning for Cleveland. They're gonna have to do that. And yes, this game again, high water mark in many other ways, but they'll need to turn that around. And so to tie back to the idea I brought up before, I picked the Magic in the series. I switched that because of how much they struggled and the overall play of the first 2 games. I am not switching back. I am not picking the Magic, but I do believe that the Magic can and likely will win more games in the series because we saw some of the theory of the case that they can be physical, that they can get stuff potentially in transition, that they can tone down some of the worst elements of their offense. So I do not expect another 40-point beatdown like this, but they could win another game. It wouldn't stun me if this series went back 2-2. It wouldn't stun me if this was like a 6 or a 7 gamer, though I do expect the Cavs to win.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of comments on the Nick Philly game, and of course, we'll select one momentarily here to give away a free year of Dunked On Prime. We'll let you know at the end of the show if that is you. But let's take a couple of these questions here. I was a little late in getting to these on Philly Knicks. If you want to hit, can you see that? You can see these, right?
I can. Yeah. So we can
Yeah,
do
okay,
one
one?
from Robin. Do you think that it's Joel Embiid's knee actually getting better, or learning where and how he can push off it? He did look better physically to me. I mean, I brought up in game 2 that the play where he looked the best physically was one where he pushed hard off his right rather than his left. He had a good drive that involved his left leg in this one. And I believe there was a little bit of extra time off, if memory serves, before this game. But he is looking better. But also, a lot of what Embiid did well in game 3 wasn't really that as reliant on his left leg. He wasn't, grinding in the post. He wasn't pushing the ball in transition. It was picking his spots. And as you said, the mental part of it, working quickly, not delaying. And so those elements will hold over. Those can be successful even as he's improving physically.
Yeah, I mean, if he's gonna shoot the ball like Dirk Nowitzki, then he doesn't need that explosion to the basket. To me, I think it's more maybe about a conditioning standpoint, maybe even more than it is just that the knee is feeling better. But it also could just be gaining confidence in it. It's now, it's what is that sign where it's like it's been blank days since it's been a tornado.
Workplace injury. Yeah.
It's now been 5 days since Embiid has suffered a knee tweak, so he's starting to get.
He looked a little gimpy after that one finish. The one where he kind of the drive. There was one where he's in the lane and we're like, but other than that, but it wasn't as bad.
It's a good question from Wes here. Oh wait, here I scrolled down and missed it. Is Sixers Knicks more dependent on reffing than any other series?
In this round, off the cuff, yes, because you have Brunson and Embiid, two players who are very adept at drawing certain kinds of calls, and those certain kinds of calls appear to be more discretionary in this iteration of NBA officiating. So yeah, I believe it is the series.
I would actually say Phoenix, Minnesota, because Minnesota doesn't really need
Interesting.
to get calls. Like, they're the more physical team, and they're really getting into the ball
Oh, like,
in
so the
that
idea that
series.
it all pulls the same direction as opposed to getting split.
Yeah, exactly. I think both teams are relatively, yeah. I mean, maybe the Knicks, if it gets called a little looser, they're going to be better, just like throwing guys around on the offensive glass, like being a little more physical, getting away with that kind of stuff. But I think that Minnesota Phoenix series, to me, like, seems like Devin Booker is just not going to have a good game unless he gets calls. Uh, let's see here. Yeah, so yeah, that was a good question there by Wes. Buckeye Nation says Fultz did look better today, so I don't think he should be playing meaningful minutes. What do you make of that?
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, Fultz, they there were times where Cole Anthony, I thought he was able to show some
Yeah.
burst offensively, and
Made his first field goal of the series, and then he made 3 more.
he did, and had some nice plays, and had a couple good passes too in the parts I was watching. And when the offense is kind of flowing in this way, it is notable that Orlando, and this isn't necessarily a guard thing, though Gary Harris is one. They scored 121 despite having 4 combined points from 2 of their starters, and Wendell Carter and Gary Harris. They each had 2 points in this game. But I just don't think there's as much of a place for Fultz unless he's thriving defensively and he's like putting the clamps into Mitchell or Garland in those minutes. Other than that, I think they can make it work, and we know how easy Markelle Fultz can be to defend in the half court.
Last one here on this. Great timeout says, for a team that seemed to have so much depth during the season, the Knicks seem to be lacking depth now.
That is definitely somewhat fair. I mean, Thibodeau is going to lean heavily on his own guys. They have 3 credible centers. They can make that work. But what the Knicks don't have is redundancies in some other important areas. They don't have those like multiple creators in that traditional
Yeah,
sense.
dribbling. They
Dribbling.
don't really have a
They
redundancies
don't have
when it
they
comes
don't
to
have
dribbling.
they don't have a surplus of shooting, which can be a challenge at certain points. And so I mean, you've documented this before as like kind of lack of two-way players, and it's not necessarily two-way players for the Knicks. It's lack of overlapping skill sets for their players.
Robin, what could the Knicks do in response to the Knicks bringing the screen higher? Well, you probably just need to go under at that point. And Brunson's not a guy who's going to pull.
Yeah, just kind of
from
pretend the screen isn't there.
30 off the drill. Well, I mean, then you run into it. But
You go what I'm saying.
yeah, if you try to just go under, get attached again, and then all right, if maybe you aren't attached anymore, and then he can start doing like some more snaking back and forth, but that kind of takes them out of the play that they want to run. And the only other thing you can really do there is either just not pressure him full court, which they want to do to wear him down, or you would then have to bring the big up there, or you could also consider just pre-switching in that circumstance as well to just have another guard there, and maybe you could trap with the guard, and then you would have Hartenstein coming downhill, but you all still down there. You could consider that might, or you could go with the box in 1 too, and then that's kind of the same as pre-switching it. Essentially, you just would you would extend that up the floor into more of a zone press look. That would actually help a bit as well, but then on a miss, not as much, because most teams don't want to go zone on a miss. But those are some ideas potentially. All right, let's get to the nightcap. Sadly, not as exciting as game 2 was, but a familiar pattern indeed between these two teams.
1, 2, 3 Coachella. But
when is Coachella? Is that soon?
It actually just happened. But
okay, yeah, I was gonna say, I thought it's yeah, because Dame definitely wasn't in the first round of the playoffs.
No, he was not in that. And Denver 112, Lakers 105, the first series to go 3-0. And That does not mean it will be a sweep like it was last year. It does, to me, mean that the Denver Nuggets will advance whenever that occurs. And I thought there were, in many ways, this game paralleled some of the others in the series, even though the notes weren't the same. The Lakers missed a ton of threes and everything like that. But a sequence that stuck out to me, it was at the end of the third quarter, though I could do a whole thing on the beginning of the fourth quarter of this game. It was a play where Jokic and Austin Reeves got tangled up. Nothing nefarious either direction on that. So Jokic is behind the play. And even if the Nuggets rely less on him in the traditional transition big stuff than some other teams do, he's not back there. And everyone pretty much knows it. Like it's pretty easy to see. And ball goes to D'Angelo Russell. And D'Angelo Russell, who had, of course, a monstrous first half of game two, he just fires a shitty contested three. And the Nuggets get the ball back, move it like one pass forward, and then Jokic is still in the front court, their offensive front court.
I remember that play.
He gets a layup, and it was just the idea of having an advantage, not even considering using that, and then getting burned on it, like third degree burned on it, rather than like first degree burned on it.
Yeah, it was pretty concerning. And demoralizing. A lot of comments here talking about the Lakers' bad body language. Yeah, I'd be pretty demoralized too. Particularly because they've always, like LeBron, AD, particularly LeBron, he's always felt like, all right, if I'm healthy, and he is healthy now, pretty much. He said he's as healthy as he's been. This is his first healthy playoffs, basically, since 2020 when he won. And obviously, he knows that he's older. Maybe he knows in his heart that he's not the best player anymore. But they get up, and it's like they just don't have any answers whatsoever. I guess the one thing I will say is, man, I'm so disappointed in D'Angelo Russell. I really thought this was going to be the year that he was going to come through in the playoffs. He had such a good regular season. I just don't know what happened to him, Danny.
Is there a phrasing for somebody not turning into a pumpkin, but just turning into themselves? Like they just pull off the mask and it's just the same person again. And
isn't that the idea of turning back into the pumpkin?
I guess it is. I guess you're right. It is
the vast majority of its existence as the pumpkin. That is the genesis of the phrase.
I have not yet gotten back into children's movies. I haven't watched Cinderella in a while. I believe you are correct. And
I haven't watched it. I haven't watched it either, but I remember the story. It turns into a stagecoach for like 6 hours. And then it gets right back into a pumpkin again. Yeah.
Yes. And so for the Lakers, I thought that was a part of it. And then for me, the other stretch where I'm like, oh, this game is over, even before it was all the way, is that, as seemingly is perpetually the case, it's just can you do damage when Jokic is off the floor? And it was a lot of Michael Porter Jr., who had struggled in the earlier part of the game. I believe Jamal Murray had a couple in that stretch as well. Reggie Jackson was dealing with an ankle issue, and Jokic is off the floor, and Denver's holding to like a double-digit lead. And you're like, oh, okay, so there isn't a path back in this, even if there were a couple of moments late where it got to like 5 and nobody even really budged too much. And so the idea that you have these opportunities, you need to make the most of them, and if you don't, then you're going to be going home, or staying home in this case.
Now, if you want to, I thought the Lakers did a lot of things well. One of them was not make three-pointers. I think they had one in the first 3 quarters, and they finished 5 of 27. But that was actually better than the Nuggets shot the 3 ball at 5 of 28. Amazing. I mean, this is the second straight, like, sub 25% from 3 game for the Nuggets. Their guys are going to shoot better. Like Murray again was 1 out of 6. Caldwell Pope was 1 out of 5. Like those guys are good shooters. Now, Justin Holiday is just like airmailing some of these. Christian Braun doesn't want to shoot at all. He was 0 for 2. I did think that the Lakers did a very nice job, particularly in the first half, where they held the Nuggets again under 50 points in the first half. I thought they did a very nice job of helping off of those guys. If they tried to run a pick and roll or a handoff on one side, then like there was one play where Prince is guarding Christian Braun on the opposite wing, and he just came all the way over to just stand right at the free throw line, and they gave up a wing three to Brown that he missed. They gave up a corner three to Watson. Like they did a good job of forcing some of these other guys to beat them and clogging the paint. And Denver had some little tricks to try to beat that. Like there was one time where they ran a side pick and roll and actually had KCP run over to the strong side at the same time as they were running that pick and roll, just so there wouldn't be a low man to help out in the roll to Jokic. That worked out pretty well. Like they have their little tricks on that, but it ended up being again, just an offensive loss for the Lakers. And AD totally ran out of gas offensively in the second. I don't think he had a basket during the competitive portion of the fourth quarter. LeBron, he was so good running pick and roll at the end of the second, start of the third in game 2. They just really didn't go to that much as well, trying to space the floor. Reeves had a decent game with over 20 points, but then no Laker had more than 8 outside of James, Davis, and Reeves, and a lot of that was just that they could not hit a three-pointer to save their lives. And particularly in the second half, I mean, just I don't recall a series in which fatigue has been more of a factor to me than this series. The Nuggets just always look fresher at the end, like Nikola Jokic, 3 face cuts on Anthony Davis for buckets or fouls in the fourth quarter, where Davis is just kind of, like mentally, I don't know it's even that he can't move. I think it's just mentally, like you just get tired guarding these guys over and over and over again. And then the other thing mentally about them is, all right, well, hey, Jamal Murray not having that great of a game. He's struggled again. He can't hit a three. Oh, Jokic hasn't been doing much on offense. Oh, well, Aaron Gordon's going to get a bunch of offensive rebounds, and he's going to fuck us up and get 24 points. 29 points in the end on 12 of 18, 5 offensive rebounds.
Yeah, one of the strangest parts of this game was the game was not close enough that it was really in peril, but the Nuggets kept on feeding Aaron Gordon the ball in foul situations, and I'm like, are they just trying to get his point total up? And I think that is maybe part of what it does, but he had a phenomenal first half. 14 points, 4 offensive rebounds, 7 of 11
saved them in the first half, because that and the shitty 3-point shooting, because the Lakers should have been up by at least 15, which of course they would have just blown that lead too. But Denver. How many threes did Denver make in the second half?
So
Denver made like at least a few in the first, and the Lakers only made 1.
So I'll do the first half numbers for both teams just because I'm on that page already. 2 of 15 for Denver, 1 of 11 for the Lakers in the first half, and then in the second half, 3 of 13 for the Nuggets, 4 of 16 for the Lakers.
Okay. Yeah. So and particularly as the Lakers would just struggle to score inside, Denver starts pulling their defense in more. AD in particular, I thought had a horrible passing game. He just gave up on throwing the ball to these support guys in the corner and was taking a lot of just like triple team jumpers at the dotted line or turning it over. LeBron drove into traffic and had some turnovers. And then, of course, Denver just absolutely destroyed them in transition. And then the Lakers, whenever Denver scores, the ball bounces 8 times. Everyone looks at each other. They try to complain about who just blew the assignment or whatever, and they inbound the ball before at the point at which every Nugget has already crossed back over half court to get in position on defense. They're never gonna. They just don't have the energy to like make effort plays. Like they start out, they always are like matching the Nuggets intensity, and then by the second half, they just can't. And like I said, physically, Gordon, Jokic, like those guys seem to be in like better shape than the Lakers guys. The other problem for the Lakers too is just their 2 best players are their 2 biggest guys. And there's kind of a reason why you don't necessarily want your bigs to be the guys who also have to create for you all the time. Jokic kind of does it in a different way, but he also doesn't have as many kind of energy responsibilities, and he's also in amazing shape. And he can also use it just using his strength a lot of times and his great hands to get rebounds and stuff. But when your only two guys who can do anything athletically on your team are also the guys who have to create all the offense. Like that, particularly given their ages, is probably asking too much.
And who also have significant defensive responsibilities. Like, I mean, Anthony Davis is one of the only good defenders that plays for the Lakers.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they tried to go Gabe Vincent a little bit more. Dinwiddie gave them a little bit. Those guys couldn't hit a three, but they actually got some okay drives. I thought Vincent was pretty good on Murray. I might even like him more as a help defender, though he did blow a rotation on Aaron Gordon. But he's the only guy who will like actually really double team with any kind of intensity. We've talked about that before. We don't need to spend too much time on adjustments because the series is over. But we had a comment about who's going to be the next Lakers coach, and I'm guessing Darvin Ham probably only has one more guaranteed year on his deal, so maybe they do move on from him just because it's hard to change anything else. But I wouldn't say that he's the problem. Or the problem there is that they have three starter level players on their team. Like Hachimura was a complete zero again. Their problem is they don't have any other worthwhile bigs. The Christian Wood signing was a bust. Hayes, they gave up on him after he was terrible in game 2. Prince is not a playoff level. It shouldn't be in a playoff rotation with his lack of athleticism. They're having to like play him at the 4. That unit gets destroyed every single time. So it seemed like they're going to be a deeper team. Maybe they would have been if Vincent had been playing all season and just been the starter next to Reeves and Russell were coming off the bench. But that's still even this version of Gabe Vincent is a guy who should probably be playing 15 minutes for you. So I don't know how they should be being Denver, and also like their two best players as a combination aren't as good as the two best Denver players. Anukar says we've seen a team get owned like this since LeBronto.
Yeah, so this is they said at the end of the broadcast, this is the 10th straight victory that the Nuggets have had over the Lakers.
No, it's the 11th.
Is it 11?
4 last playoffs, 4 in this regular season, 3 in these playoffs.
Whew. I can't think of one.
Well, and particularly the way that like they'll get down in the first half and you just know they're going to come back.
Oh yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, and this one that wasn't even as necessary. I mean, the Lakers had the 8-0 run to start the game, had a couple of like LeBron runouts, and it's like, the Nuggets aren't perturbed. You're not going through it in any sort of concern there, and that's a part of why some of us thought they should at least consider trying to finesse a different opponent. But that's the way these things go. And in terms of the Lakers, like we got a comment from, I think it was from Adil about. Surprised, don't think Ham's been a problem. Lack of adjustments is that there are certain things that they could try and that they could get into, but part of the problem for the Lakers for me against this specific opponent is not only their lack of talent, but their lack of talent in ways that can create as many problems for Denver. And so I don't think there are, we spent time in other series like, oh, they could play this guy and do this thing, and I'm a big believer that Gabe Vincent can be a positive player. I thought he could, if he were healthier and could do everything else, maybe he could do some stuff on Jamal Murray. But this is an under-talented Lakers team. And they've been under-talented almost every single year of the Rob Pelinka era for various different reasons. And that's, they've either misidentified talent, traded away good players in exchange for bad players or bad fits. And so to me, this is groceries, not the chef. Personally.
Yeah, and am I going to tell you that Darvin Ham is like a genius coach? Also, other than Spo, like when has LeBron ever had, a marquee, like really empowered coach? I mean, Ty Lue kind of became that, and that's the coach that LeBron always wanted to have. But I think ultimately, watching KCP just kill the Lakers 2 years in a row is just such poetic justice. He wasn't that great tonight, but he was huge for them. The other thing too for the Nuggets, like they didn't even have to really go to Aaron Gordon on AD and KCP and LeBron. The one time they did that, LeBron actually like went right into the post and scored, which I think just he should have done last time, but also he was too tired to do that at the end of game 2. And so Jokic got in foul trouble. Like that also kind of gave the Lakers some more ability to attack the basket. Like Jokic will usually, he's one of the guys who's probably most affected in terms of how he plays in foul trouble, but didn't matter. In the end, the Lakers just weren't able to do enough to beat them. But yeah, someday we'll do a podcast episode about like the greatest own goals and trading away like that summer of 2021 for the Lakers, trading away KCP and Kuzma and a first to get Westbrook, increasing their salary so they didn't feel comfortable, i.e. they were too cheap to re-sign Caruso. And can you imagine where this Lakers team would be right now if they just had KCP and Caruso?
First of all, they probably wouldn't have been the 7 seed. They would have had it. They would have been better there.
Like they would be like easily the best defense in the league, right? And maybe they would struggle to score a little bit, but like they'd kind of be like Minnesota, right? Like they would be more kind of like that sort of a team, I think, than the team that they are right now. And that was a formula that was pretty damn dominant for the first 2 years of the LeBron AD era, and then they decided they're going to change it up because LeBron, although he's a great player, constantly has wanted more playmaking. And then, they still probably would have had Reeves in that scenario too, you would think. So anyway, that's we'll save that for another show. Oh yeah, they also kept Taylor Horton Tucker and let Caruso go. What do you think he's going to get in free agency this year?
You got mad at me with my Taylor Horton Tucker thing last year in the mock, or something like that. There was something related to his option or something like that. Oh, that I declined the team option. You're like, oh, they're gonna do that.
No, player option.
Yeah, that's right. It was a player option. Oof.
All right. Let's see. Any other good comments here before we depart?
There was a question about if there was a team in this year's playoffs that were to be the first to win a series down 0-3, other than the Nuggets, who would it be? Boston's the most talented team. I think I would go with them.
I mean, Boston might have done it last year had it not been for the Tatum ankle sprain.
Yeah. So, and I do really, I've enjoyed the Thunder a lot, and they've moved up in my, like for you, I think they moved up in my West Power rankings, but that would be a lot for them.
Can any West team beat the full strength Nuggets? Maybe we won't go there, but let's go just who has the best chance right now to you?
I'm excited for the possibility of a Wolves Nuggets series, which is looking more likely. Now we'll get a lot more detail on that as that series shifts to Phoenix on Friday. I think it might be the Thunder just through sheer counter programming, but to me, it's one of those two. Am I missing something obvious?
Well, the Thunder will have home court too. That would be the other thing.
Oh, that's a good point.
I would point to.
Oh, the Mavs. The Mavs are another. Yeah, that's true.
I don't think so with the Mavs. I think they don't have enough spacing.
And the other thing,
they have nobody to guard Jokic. I mean, maybe Klebo would be like semi-okay.
And Denver also, they're kind of top-heavy defensive approach where they have these like higher level guys and then other players who can fit in. I think that actually works reasonably well against Dallas, depending on how Jason Kidd wants to structure their actions. Also, Michael Malone versus Jason Kidd. I have some thoughts.
Yeah, Wolves. If the Wolves had home court, maybe I would give them an equal chance to, like the Wolves. I think the Wolves kind of have the highest median outcome against Denver, but I think OKC is the one that maybe could cause
because you're looking for the top 5% outcomes there.
Like I could see OKC just getting completely destroyed by them. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I think they have enough variance with their offense. Now trying to guard Jokic in the post could be a little bit more problem for them. I mean I think that's going to be a big offensive series. Yeah, that'll be a fun series outlook to do if it does come to fruition. OKC's got a lot of work to do still too. I'll probably pick them to beat Clippers or Dallas, but they'll probably pick it in 7. Anything news wise here? Looks like Chris Middleton might be out. He's questionable. He sprained his ankle apparently at the beginning of game 2, which I don't think I caught that because I wasn't watching. I think I was watching the other game right at that point. But
Yeah,
that
I
may have
was
swelled
watching
up
and
on him.
was more scared in the moment than when he came back and played. I was like, "Oh, okay," and do that. And
Yeah.
and when we've seen that a couple times in these playoffs. Stephen Curry wins Clutch Player of the Year. You and I didn't do our full digging on that,
Well,
but
here, can we finish up on the
oh,
Bucks?
sorry.
First of all,
Yeah.
he's going to be questionable. We don't know actually if he's going to play. He didn't really practice today. Doc had said there's some concern, and certainly the way they've dealt with Middleton's injuries all year, he hasn't exactly been like fighting through stuff. And then Giannis is going to be doubtful apparently. There was a report that he hadn't done any running yet. Doc said he'd done like some movement. They didn't do any contact in practice today, of course. And then any other kind of injury stuff. We talked about Mitchell Robinson being out.
I mean, we had kind of expected this, but Shams had a thing today that Zion is hopeful that as the playoffs go on, he could make a return, but it sounded like that return would be in a round that isn't the first, so that's tough news for the Pels.
Yeah. Oh, I did want to say one other thing about Lakers Nuggets too. Having the guy who's running USA Basketball be a color announcer is not very good. Like I don't think Grant Hill said a single critical thing in the entire game, and nor would I if I were him. Given he's really just every time something happens, every missed shot is great defense, and every score is great offense. And yeah, it was really very anodyne commentary, which was a little disappointing. And sadly, we won't be doing any more playback, so I'll probably have to listen to him in the next game if he's still on there. At least we won't be doing playback for that series. Obviously, we'll be doing it for other ones. And yeah, Clutch Player of the Year, Curry won it. This is one where I think a lot of people just don't know what to do with this award. I don't love it, frankly. He had amazing clutch numbers, but the Warriors, by Seth Stats, won 3.4 fewer clutch games than expected. A lot of that was because his teammates had shot like 40% true shooting in the clutch or something like
True.
that. And, his numbers were crazy. And he had some big shots, like he had that big game winner against Phoenix, for example. But also, like, the Warriors blew so many games late. And it's just hard for me to say that the clutch player of the year, and he had his share of mistakes and stupid turnovers too that led to some of those. And then DeMar DeRozan was amazing, and the Bulls were the best clutch teams in Seth's stats since the tracking data, since he's been doing it basically. So that they won 8.8 clutch games more than expected, which is just an insane number. And that of course is based on, it's not just based on their clutch record being over 500, but it's also based on where you are when you enter the clutch. If you're down 5, obviously your win expectancy is probably only about 15%. If assuming both teams are of equal quality. All right, I think we're done here. So let's pick a couple of winners. Feel free to email dunkedonprime@gmail.com. And let's see here. And we'll take the question too. We'll definitely get Robin Jeffrey in there. He's had a lot of great comments and questions today. We appreciate it. So Robin, go ahead and email Dan to redeem. If you're already a member, you'll get a free year tacked on to what you already have. And let's also go for, it's a very scientific process here to select someone.
I liked Wes Bird's question on officiating. Which series was most
Yes,
dependent?
that was a good one. Yeah. All right. Yeah. You're half of this operation. So Wes it is. And come on down and get your prize. dunkedonprime@gmail.com. Thanks so much for joining us, y'all. And I will be on with a special guest for tomorrow's games. Talk to y'all soon.